Hello, this is Ayush, and this is the Build to Apply Palantir project. So I've created an Apple tariff simulation tool for Apple supply chain managers, so where they can basically understand the supply chain better, and basically simulate various scenarios, whether it's applying tariffs between countries or whether it's switching suppliers, and see what effect that has on their base KPIs. So obviously I haven't talked with any supply chain managers and haven't had a contact with them. So basically understanding customer needs and what KPIs they care about is the most important part. But based on my knowledge of tariffs, I have chosen these four KPIs: the total annual tariff expense, the weighted average tariff rate, the country diversification index, and the risk exposure index. The latter two I can expand on later because I use some of my own knowledge of tariffs to kind of understand what kind of logic might go into it. Below it, we have the headlines of the day, which affects the various supply chain parts as well as the parts which Apple imports. So basically, have a news API where we can get the latest news from and get it filtered through GPT-4 to understand which headlines basically have the most impact on the supply chain, and even get to the basic most important H2O codes which the headline affects. And these HTU codes are basically the codes which United States governments provides to the important items. So this is just unique items which Apple imports from various countries. Below it, of course, we have the exposure map where we get all the suppliers and which countries the suppliers belong to. Then we have the exposure map where we can understand more deeply where all the suppliers are, and we can see the names of the suppliers, and then we can filter out and see which countries they belong to and how much they're importing into the US for Apple. And then comes the most important page where the user is most likely to spend the most time: simulate supply chain changes. So on this page, we obviously have the same four KPIs which we had on the main page. And below that, we have this object table, which is like the most important and like all the data which we have so far. We also have lots of other columns which I didn't provide for the sake of simplicity. But this is basically the description, the HTU code, the effective tariff rate on that part, and the part importance, which kind of indicates on how many different Apple products or how much quantity the Apple is importing and how much urgency Apple has to get that product. All of that combined kind of gives you the importance of that part. And then we have the supply reliability, which is more subjective, similar to part importance, but it can also be switched around. Right now I don't have provision for that, but that is something which is definitely going to interest a supply chain user, a supply chain manager. Then we have the supplier and the country. On the left hand panel, you can see the various toggles we have, which is we can modify the tariff rates and we can modify the supplier countries. We can choose a specific part and we can change the country which is we are importing it from, and that would change the tariff rate and it would reflect on these KPIs as well and how these KPIs change. And modifying the tariff rates is kind of the same thing. We are just choosing a particular country like China, and we can, for instance, right now we have like 45-30% tariff rate. We can reduce this to 10 maybe, and we can simulate it and we can see the changes in the KPIs, like the annual tariff expense reduced significantly. So did the weighted average tariff rate. Uh, and we can even do it on certain HTU codes for China, the items which we are importing from them. So yeah, this is the main page where the supply chain manager can easily switch around and play around with the various parameters and basically save millions and millions of dollars by understanding what decisions and what suppliers to switch and take and which countries to get the imports from, to try to save and maximize the KPIs as much as possible. As for the KPIs, as I said, country diversification index is based on the HHI index, which is kind of a standard economic measure, which is kind of a weighted average of various countries and how much Apple is importing from them. And the risk exposure index is also very similar to that, where we go through every row and understand in the worst case scenario how much tariff and how much penalties are we paying for that, and basically adding them up in some unique way to understand the risk exposure in a unique and unbiased way. So that was all for me. Really look forward to hearing back from you, and thank you so much.